What up, everybody? It's Prez, your boy, your host, your guide, your Sherpa. This is the seventh episode of season 4 of Draft Strickland, and the first one that I've recorded since your Yukon Huskies took the national championship for the second year in a row. I won't say my Yukon Huskies, even though I did spend 1 year in Storrs, Connecticut before I got the fuck out of there. Uh, because I don't really root for them because the 1 year I was there was the 1 year in the last 30 years that they were terrible. So Prez holds a grudge. With me to talk about a very interesting topic that I will reveal in a minute is not a first time guest, not a second time guest. I don't even know how many times he's been a guest, but it's Chuck of the Chucking Darts podcast. If you don't know, the Chucking Darts podcast is one of the longer running, more informative, hilarious podcasts on the interwebs for NBA draft enthusiasts and casuals alike. You can find him on Twitter at Chucking Darts. And I highly recommend you follow him because that's where the good stuff is. The pods, videos, other tidbits, hot takes, you name it. Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for that introduction, Prez. I'm very honored to be back. Yeah, longer running is no joke. It like very literally, my podcasts are very long because that is what I do when I talk about the draft. I just sort of run off at the mouth. So hopefully, this won't be too unlistenable for anyone. But looking forward to this theme. I know you haven't quite debuted it yet, but we've been talking offline, or pardon me, off air about it for a while, and I think it's really important for this draft. I think it's a good one to sink our teeth into, and so I'm just very excited to be here. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I wish the Knicks would get their fucking shit together versus the bummy Chicago Bulls. They're down by 1 and turning the ball over left and fucking right. So whatever. It's game 82. I can't be that mad. I just kind of want us to have 50 wins just to say we can have 50 wins, but it is what it is. So the topic that we have alluded to today, I don't even want to talk about the Knicks. They are on my shit list for half an hour.
Dude, they might be the 2 seed. I mean, that's a big deal. It's not just game 82. I
They
see
might.
they're running into the Bulls where Vooch is actually playing well, which you never want to see. If Vooch is actually playing well against your team, the Bulls are legitimately dangerous to beat anybody. But
He's scoring. He was everything he was putting up was going in the first half, and he's doing his thing out there. And the Knicks are they're 6 of 21 from 3. They have 12 turnovers, 5 of which belong to OG. It's just a really weird fucking game. They're missing easy shots, but it's a long game. They're only down 2 despite all that. So we'll see what happens. Home court would be nice. The 2 seed sounds more impressive than it is in the East, as you know. It's just there's a lot of very good teams, and perhaps the Knicks are deserving of the 2 seed. In my head, I don't feel like a 2 seed with all the injuries, but I guess it's nice to be the 2 seed by default if you can swing it.
It's pretty nice. You win that first round series, and depending on who the 3 is, like, I don't know. I feel like if the 3 gets through, whether it's Milwaukee or Cleveland, I would think that with Milwaukee's circumstances and your series against the Cavs last year, you'd feel pretty good about going to the conference finals. Again, you have to get through round 1 first, but I think it's a good time to be a Knicks fan. As a reformed Knicks fan myself, I can't claim their fandom because I turned away from them and just threw myself onto a bed of darts, a few years ago, and that's where most of my NBA attention has been paid. But if I turn on the Knicks and it's on MSG, I feel that my heartstrings get tugged. So I want them to do well, and I think them making a real deep run, winning 2 playoff series, and then taking their shot at Boston, who, they're going to be shooting themselves around their feet, maybe not quite in the foot this time, but they'll make themselves dance. It's not too bad to be the team on the other side who knows who they are, has an identity, and has a closer. So, I'm excited for the Knicks, very much so.
I'm glad. That makes me happy. We will always welcome you back to the flock if you so desire, Chuck. This is we may be petty haters, but we're not cruel. So not like you. It's not like you became a fucking Nets fan, in which case I would tell you
No,
fuck
no,
off.
oh
But
my God, no. Of
yeah,
course not. Nothing against the
exactly.
Nets. I mean, they've had their own like tribulations over the last 10 years, but I mean, no. No, the Knicks are like they're Villanova now, which is so fun. I mean,
It
that's
is fun.
like what a great identity and what a relevant draft identity, even though they didn't draft all these guys. But given our topic this morning, I mean, though, or I guess this afternoon, but Brunson, Hart, and DiVincenzo, I mean, these were not one and dones, and look at what they're doing now. You know, so neither was OG for that matter. But
Most of the You're right, and I'll stop beating around the bush, listeners, and tell you the topic, but not just yet. So this topic, as Chuck alluded to, it is one of the driving factors, not just for how the Knicks draft, but just how they construct their roster. Period, free agents, trades, draft, and all that. And what we're here to talk about is the 2024 draft and the old prospects within it. How old is old? That's a great question, because I think about previous drafts where I'm like, man, this prospect's cool, but he's so old. And then I look at the 2024 draft and I'm like, man, that other prospect from that other year wasn't old at all. Like Keegan Murray. I remember being like, man, like he's so much older than the other prospects. This dude is like barely 22 as a prospect. Same with Obi Toppin. We got a bunch of 23-year-olds. We got some 24-year-olds in this class. So I was like, damn, I was disrespecting these guys like Obi and Keegan, talking about them like they're fucking ancient statues when they're just a little well seasoned. So what I want to talk to Chuck about is, what do I do with these older prospects, particularly the ones that are closer to 23 or 24, because historically these are there is a not insignificant number of prospects who I have loved who are older and then have just kind of flamed out or underwhelmed, possibly, but not necessarily because they were older. Grant Riller is the patron saint of these quadruple A players who Prez has become obsessed with through the years. So we're gonna talk about a couple of them, and it's especially interesting for this class because with it being weaker at the top compared to your traditional or average class in terms of just high probability star bets, then teams are faced with the question, man, if these players at the top are kind of shaky gambles, should I spend this draft pick on something that has a little less variance, that might be it might not be a home run swing, but you see the defense in a shift and you get a pitch to just hit it through the side where no defenders are, where no fielders are, and you just take the single or double, right? So we'll get into the particulars, but I guess my first question for you is, have you had issues projecting older prospects, or is this just a Prez thing?
Prez, I have issues projecting every kind of prospect. That's sort of that's the calling that we answer in our in our cave here. But yeah, I think actually I'm working on a piece that I started back in January and just have never like gotten around to really formulating and finishing. But I had a similar inclination to you, realizing that a lot of players who've gotten love in this cycle were upperclassmen. I mean, that's sort of, that could be code for this is not a very good draft. I mean, that's what a lot of the opinion is about this draft. But it forces you to think like, well, are these upperclassmen really just not going to be NBA players? Or is there a way to sort of separate, the cream from the crop? And what I did at the time, which I need to update now for the end of the year, what my article is going to be, if I ever get around to writing it, was I looked at the time, the top 250 players in the NBA this season in minutes played. And I then filtered that by players who were, the cutoff I used was age 21. Were you at
Okay.
least 21 years old when you entered the NBA?
So the
Okay.
draft or the beginning of the year?
Beginning of the year, I
Okay.
believe. Did you? I think that's what I did. But I wasn't too like, if you turn 21 3 weeks into the year, I don't know that I like lobbed you out or anything. And I tried to filter it even more because there were more guys than I would have anticipated, and I didn't want to have an article where I listed 75 guys, and I was like, well, what do these guys have in common? Because I would have lost any reader by then. So to filter it further, I did age 21 when they entered the league, top 250 in the league this year in minutes played, which basically means you're a rotation guy. And then I filtered it down to players who were not, I think, first team all conference in the year that they were selected. So basically, Keegan Murray does not make this list because he was either National Player of the Year or like a first team All American or whatever.
What was the purpose of that filter?
It was just I was trying to identify upperclassmen sleepers, and to define what a sleeper is kind of nebulous. It's always, all of us do a bit of the straw man thing. We're like, people aren't talking enough about whatever. And you're like, which people? And you're like, those people. So I wanted to try to use some objective thing, but using that filter got me down to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 20 names. These are, again, guys at least 21 years old who are not even first team all conference, who are now like solid rotation players. I can give you a lot of the names, but the stars out of this group were Jimmy Butler and Chris Middleton. Now, Jimmy, that's more a comment on how terrible voters were back in like 2012 about identifying who was all conference and who was not all conference. When he played for Marquette. But the majority of the rest of these guys, one of whom is a current Knick, and Dante DiVincenzo, he was not first team all conference. The majority of them are role players in the NBA. And I think in our discussion, it's important to distinguish between upperclassmen who might actually have a path to being more than role players, to being guys who could maybe eventually make 30 million a year, be a top 3 starter on a team, or guys who fit your sort of baseball metaphor of like beating the shift. We've got a rotation guy on the cheap, and that's a win given the uncertainty around the draft. And I won't get too much into my article. I mean, that's a tangent, but a lot of them, the traits that they share, I think, are going to be traits that come up in our episode. So I'm excited to get into it. And if you want to know any of the other names, I can give them to you, but I don't want to get too far into my thing.
You want to just throw out a couple, just random ones?
Yeah, sure. So
idea?
I split them up into wings, guards, and bigs. And again, I have to update it for who is now leading the league in minutes to see who anyone fell off. But like, there was Butler and Middleton. There's my guy, the patron saint of my podcast, Trey Murphy III. Duncan Robinson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Aaron Nesmith. He got hurt his year, so I mean, he probably would have been all conference otherwise. But Kenrich Williams, Alex Caruso, Jay Sean Tate. Those were the guys, and Tate probably fell off the minutes threshold by now. But those are wings. The guards are like Max Strus, Bruce Brown, Royce O'Neal, DiVincenzo, Terrence Mann, Christian Brown, Nikhil, Alexander Walker, Isaiah Joe, Andre Jackson Jr. from your beloved Stores Connecticut Huskies. Couple other names, and then bigs I had Xavier Tillman, Mo Wagner, Paul Reed, and Mark Williams. So yeah, those are a lot of the names. And if you're making connections in your head, the main one to me is a lot of them have defensive versatility, because the idea basically is that if you have offense that is going to translate and scale up so radically in the NBA, then chances are you're going to be first team all conference in college if you're an upperclassman. Like, chances are that offense has come out and started to really dominate your competition. So if you, Dalton Connect, who I think we're probably going to discuss today, he's an example of like clearly first team all conference. He's an offensively tilted player. The hope for him is that offense scales all the way up. For more sleepery guys, you're looking for guys whose defense is going to translate, be versatile, and then the offense will come around to an acceptable level to stay on the floor. So, that's sort of the idea to me when I was looking at these names.
Okay, those trends are definitely going to be helpful in our analysis. And the other thing we'll get into is like among these older players, is there like a red line where all of a sudden it just like 21, like Keegan's a perfect example where it's like Keegan felt like such an old prospect, but he really wasn't. So, as you know, when you contrast that with, say, Grant Riller or a lot of guys this year, and they were like, no, like there are sophomores and third-year players in the NBA who are younger than these guys, right? Like, who are also 22, 23. So, we can start off with the guy that you mentioned, Dalton Knecht. I want to cover about 5 guys, maybe more. And I'm picking him first because to me, among older prospects this year, he's kind of off by himself, right? He's now pretty consistently mocked, if not in the top 10, pretty much in top 12s. So despite many a Knicks fans' desire to see him drop, his star only shined brighter as the year went on, as conference play went on, as the tournament went on, with Tennessee being a great team on defense, and he was carrying their offense and all that. So, I mean, to me, I look at Dalton Knecht, and like in terms of just the aesthetics, he kind of just leaps off the page as a old guy you bet on, right? Because he's not like, there's nothing gimmicky about him. Like, he has hops, he's strong as shit, he can shoot the fuck out of the ball, he can run a pick and roll. Like, this is like you don't have to be a draft nerd to just watch Dalton Knecht score like half of Tennessee's points and be like, oh, like this guy seems like an NBA player. And then you look at some of his stats, double digit BPM, a really high number of threes per 100. And then let me look it up so I don't mess this up. The other thing that kind of jumps out, I use as a benchmark for whether or not a college player scores a shit ton, like a really crazy amount, is how many points per 100. And if a player's over 40, that means they don't just score a lot. They are like just raining points down on other opponents. And, there's plenty of players who are not good NBA players who scored over 40 per 100, but like if it feels like this guy should be a good scorer in the NBA, and then checking the points per 100 and seeing that thing over 40 is kind of a green flag for me. And Dalton just passes that. As I said, he pretty much carried his offense. So like, I'm personally not worried. He's an old. I've said this before, and it's come to bite me in the ass before. But he's the kind of scoring prospect where, yeah, he's gonna be 23, but I don't care. Like, we could debate his ceiling, but like, I'm pretty sure he's gonna be a solid NBA player.
Yeah, I think solid NBA. Certainly. I had my episode on Dalton with Maxwell Baumbach.
Nice.
Because he was one of the early guys on Dalton going back to last summer. He was writing about him and talking about him as a first-round pick. And we had a bit of a debate because I think Maxwell was and probably still is a bit higher on Dalton than I am. But the debate was not, is he an NBA player or not? The debate was just how good of a one is he going to be? I mean, because like everything you said, at some point you're like, well, if this guy who can finish and score from all 3 levels and, has a really quick release and is 6'6", if he's not an NBA player, then what is he? Is he just like the greatest European player of all time? Like, I'll take my chances on him just being an NBA player. I think with him though, you can contrast him with a guy like McCullough, who got hurt, in the middle of the season, but was tracking to be a first team All-American, and say, well, okay, these guys are basically the same age. I think McCullough's like 3 weeks older. They're both 23 now. I think McCullough turned 23 in March, and I think Knecht probably turned 23 this month in April. It's something like that. One is defensively tilted in McCullough. One is offensively tilted in Connect. Neither is like completely hopeless on the opposite side of the ball where their strengths lie, but it's a philosophy of who would you rather, like who's easier to develop, what would you rather have on your team next to better players. And I guess in Dalton's case, do you feel like there's real upside there for him to not just be good, but to enter sort of a Desmond Bainish territory of this guy can be one of the three best players on our team who, by the end of his rookie season, or pardon me, end of his rookie deal, would be eligible for like a big money extension? Because that's where I think top 10, if you believe him to be in the top 10, I think that's sort of the ceiling you have to believe in him, even in this draft. I think you have to sort of imagine, I want to take a guy who by the end of his rookie deal will be really worth reinvesting in. That's sort of my thought on it. So that's sort of the line within Dalton's projection. I don't know where you fall on it, but it's an interesting question. I think there's like really good arguments on both sides of the ledger for him. I think I probably fall a bit more pessimistic on him reaching that level, but I would not be stunned to see him get there.
I guess I really like the way you put it. The only thing I would differ from you is I would set the bar a little lower than Des Bane, because and I would take the way you phrased it a little after that when you said like a player worth investing in a second contract, right? Because like Des Bane is a max guy, so like if Dalton Connect turns out to be like Bogdanovich from the Hawks, like, is that a waste of a top 10 pick? I don't think so personally. I think that'd be a very good outcome. Even with Bogdan's flaws, is he better as a sixth man? Should he be a starting shooting guard, whatever. But especially in this, and this gets into like the kind of context of the class where it's like, yeah, normally with a top 10 pick, you want to have a little bit more upside on deck, but you can't manufacture upside out of thin air, right? And if it's not there, it's not there among a crop of players. So not saying it's not there. It's definitely there among guys. It's just different than say last year or next year. So, but in terms of how you described Connect, I think I'm with you. Like he's gonna go high, and part of the reason he's gonna go high is he's just a safe pick, right? Like for a GM, like the worst case is he sucks at defense and is a spark plug scorer who can play substantial minutes just because he's an NBA athlete with real plus shooting from day one. So like that's a fine like bad scenario, I think.
Yeah, certainly. I think like there will be he might go even a little bit higher than I think he should go because of that.
Same.
Because like GMs, whether or not they pay lip service to this philosophy, most will not admit this, but a lot of them like draft not to bust. They draft not to lose. And that's not really how I think you should do it, but that's how it works. And I think Dalton, like you just have to it's just he is a legit 3-level scorer. He was the best pure scorer in the country. And he has NBA dimensions. I'm sure that he will test just fine, if not better than fine, at the combine. And so, like GMs will cock their head sideways at, whomever, Cody Williams or Rob Dillingham. These talented freshmen who have either size questions or productivity questions or strength questions, and they'll just get itchy and they'll say, I don't really want to wait around to develop all these guys. And so I'll take what I think is the sure thing. I think one of the players, I can't remember if we talked about it in our episode, me and Maxwell, but that's a useful comparison to Dalton, though, about maybe the floor is a little lower than it seems, would be Duarte, who, older guy, very productive as an older guy in his last year at Oregon, super efficient scorer. Had some on-ball defensive juice. And then, that was the book on him. And he went, I think, a little higher then I think he should have gone because he was a lotto pick, right? He can go 13 in
Yeah,
22.
Knicks tried to trade up to get him and couldn't do it.
And it was because of this perceived, well, you've got this rotation wing on a rookie deal. I mean, and he started out hot playing off of Sabonis, where that paint was always vacated in Indiana. And then he was traded during his rookie deal in sort of for like second rounders. Like it wasn't, he didn't exactly return a massive haul to his team, especially since the pick after him was Moses Moody. The pick after that, I think, was Kispert. The pick after that was Şengün. And the pick after that was Trey Murphy. So you can try to go for the sure thing, but you better be sure that what you're passing up isn't all that hot. And so, like, I think that comparing just the two of them, I think Dalton is a more physically imposing player than Duarte. I think he gained separation, particularly off the dribble, more easily than Duarte did. So I think there's reasons to be more optimistic. But you just have to remember that, like, the perceived safety is not always as safe as it seems.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I know I was high on Duarte. I think the injuries probably impacted him a little bit too, but either way, like even if he wasn't injured, those guys who were behind him were some fucking studs. So I think I agree with you in terms of like you lose a little bit. And Duarte is one of those guys who he was 24 as a rookie, so
Yeah.
you wonder if he was beyond that threshold
Possibly, yeah.
of where the productivity is like, pick any 24-year-old who gets more than 5 minutes a game in the NBA, right? Like put Deuce in fucking college right now, see what happens. Like he's gonna score 1,000 points and lock up every single player he goes against. Like it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah,
So
Deuce was a stud as a sophomore at West Virginia, man. He was locking up Cade Cunningham in the Big 12 in his day.
yeah, Deuce is like a lot of Knicks, quickly Grimes, Deuce. Like these are guys who they weren't one and dones, but they weren't old as draft prospects. So that tends to be where the Knicks sweet spot lies. Like Obi was the older one, and he was 22, but usually it's 20 or 21-year-olds. But with Connect, I mean, normally I would definitely be wary because of what you said, like the combo of age, meaning maybe they are a little more overqualified than we like to admit for college, and then also just because we want, maybe it's their production as an overqualified college player is overshadowing upside in production of other upperclassmen or younger players who are older but not 23, like guys who are 21 or 22. So it is an interesting dichotomy. I want to move to one of the other guys you mentioned who he takes the man, who was it in? It feels like every other year mock drafts pick a guy to just mock to the Knicks based not on who the Knicks pick in the last 5 years, but their perception of Coach Thomas Thibodeau.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's funny because you look at like the guys who have the role guys who have flourished surprisingly under Tibbs, and for every Taj Gibson, there's like 5 Nate Robinsons and Aaron Brooks. And it's like he actually kind of likes gunners as long as you like mostly do your job. So it's interesting to see Kevin McCullough mocked to the Knicks over and over and over again, both before his injury and after his injury. And I mean, there's definitely some merit to it, right? Like the Knicks don't have time to give fucking 5 minutes a game, much less 15 or 20 minutes a game to some 19-year-old, no matter how talented they are, because their rotation is deep. For most of the really good teams don't have depth, and most of the really bad teams that have like prospect depth aren't competitive. And the Knicks are kind of this weird like middle ground, that although they've consolidated a bit after trading for OG Anunoby. So, people look at our bench and they say, well, there's a bunch of short guys. Precious is there. I guess it would be nice to slot a wing. And that logic is pretty smart. And, when you consider like, Josh Hart does his best, but like, would be nice to not play him for 40 minutes a game and depend on Precious Achua as your backup power forward, right? Like, Obviously, if we had a healthy Julius Randle, that would change things. But anyway, I think this is all where a lot of folks' heads are at regarding the Knicks and roster construction, assuming that no pick gets traded. So I see the vision for Kevin McCullough, and I guess I have a few questions on him for you. One is just, well, let's just start with this one. Where are you at with him? Because people are all like, I know some people who had him in the first round and now have him in the second round. Some people who have moved him around within the first round. Like, people seem to be all over the place, especially since he's been out of sight, out of mind since he went down with an injury.
Yeah, I actually have him right around where the Knicks would be picking. I have him right around like 20, somewhere between probably 18 and 25 is where I'm going to end up with him. So I really liked him early in the year when his shot was going down so much. I know that his shot, it does not necessarily pass the Prez test mechanics wise with his sort of Dorothy clicking his heels when he
Kevin
when he
McCullough
shoots it.
has the kind of shot where if we were playing pickup and someone shot like Kevin McCullough, I would not defend the first three. It would probably go in. And then I would not defend the second three. And then it would probably go in. And I would realize he's just enough of a shooter that I should defend him, but it would be too late and my team would lose.
Well, here's the I mean, look, I think, again, talking about, in terms of our theme about these older guys and what has kept them out of the NBA, both Dalton and Kevin, I think, have a decent amount going for them because in Dalton's case, he just was not at, like, he just hadn't been discovered by a big school. It wasn't as though, like, the reason most guys don't make the NBA throughout their college career usually is that they just aren't athletic enough to make the NBA. And when they go through the combine, they get told, like, you're not quite athletic enough to do it. But in McCullough's case, that's never been the question. It's never been, can this guy navigate and stay on an NBA court athletically? It's always just been the jumper. And so if you can, if you feel confident that his shooting is going to be real enough, like, everything else is more or less there. You know, he's strong. He has great feel for the game, particularly as an off-ball defender and as a connecting passer. So he can fit a variety of lineups. And so you just, you know, if you feel confident in your shooting coach, there are, quote unquote, if he shoots guys in every draft, like a lot of them. But some of them are, you're really wishing upon a star that the form comes along. And you're also maybe papering over some feel concerns with, like, well, this sort of like maybe Kalel Ware, to use an example. Kalel's a younger kid, but people are sort of looking at him and saying, well, if that jumper is really there at the NBA level, then you have all these tools. When in reality, it's not as though Kalel is really affecting games and driving winning and just the shot hasn't come around yet. McCullough is. Like, when he played for Kansas this year, they were a top 10 team in the country pretty clearly when you watched him. And he was clearly the best player on the floor, clearly drove their offense and their defense, got his offense within the flow of the game. And when he left and when he was injured, they were pretty rudderless. So it's clear that, like, if the jumper is there for him, he has all the other pieces to contribute right away. And to me, that is worth a first round pick. I think with him, it's not as though he's like a freak athlete, and he and Dalton are both like 6'5", 6'6", where you would prefer them in the modern NBA to be maybe 6'7", 6'8", to really pass sort of the wing test. Because, you know, if you're in that 6'6" range and you can't really distribute off the dribble, then you do kind of fall into the Duarte zone. But McCullough is like a very sound connecting passer. That's more of a question. But there's a place for both. And I think there really is a place for Kevin. The reason he's not higher for me is more about sort of durability issues because he keeps getting nicked up. I think his
can you talk a little bit about his injury history
go
for
ahead.
folks who, no, I say could you, because I just know
well,
he hurt.
I think it's each of the last couple years at
Okay.
Kansas he did, and when you just watch him play as an older guy, he doesn't, even though he reads the game so well and he's constantly putting himself in the right position, he does not like really physically overwhelm. Like he physically hangs and he's tough, but it's not as though he puts defenses or offenses in like real binds. It's not as though like he freaks them out. Oh shit, Kevin McCullough's going to the hoop. We have to send help. That's what Connect does. And
Yeah,
you saw
Connect
it
on a lot of his drives. It's like people make business decisions
right
with Connect.
and he's so good at getting to the line because he has these long strides and he has these wide shoulders where he can create very good angles to where if you're not a really sound defender, you're gonna have some sort of like slappy hacky foul on him because he's just by you more quickly than you anticipate. McCullough is not that way, and so if he is not going to be physically overwhelming anyone as a defender, then you start to ask yourself, well, he's a good defender, but those guys that I listed from my little article, guys like
like
Caruso
Jones,
or Dorian Finney-Smith or DiVincenzo. I mean, these guys are much more in sort of the menace category of defenders, and I don't know that he's necessarily really a menace. And so, with defense, it's hard. If you like so many players in the NBA, their contribution is more offensive than defensive. For the very few whose defense is quote unquote their calling card, guys like McBride, like they are physical beasts laterally on the ball, like putting you in hell. And
right, Deuce McBride has dunked on people, even though he's like my height.
Right. And I just don't know that McCullough is quite that level of athlete. So you couple that with the fact that his injuries are kind of worrisome. Like it was a knee this year, and then he tried to come back and it wasn't quite there. And he's kind of older. Like to me, he's a guy who a team is fine to take him to try to get him into an NBA strength and conditioning program and to really work on the jumper. But I also am like very okay passing on him and just saying like, I kind of doubt it all comes together for Kevin in the way that it needs to. And just, letting some other team put in the work to try to reap those rewards. Like I wouldn't feel too bad about taking a shot on another guy besides McCullough.
I think what you articulated is why the Knicks won't draft him. You look at he'd be the first guy who's not a center who they drafted who wasn't just like kind of an overwhelming scorer at the college level. And to go back to my earlier back of the napkin metric, he scored 31 points per 100 possessions, which, to be clear, is like a very good number. Like it's not in that insane player 40 range, but most players are not. Like Quentin Grimes was 33 per 100. I think Deuce was right around let me see real quick. I think Deuce was right around the same. Deuce was 26, so even lower, right? So like it's not like he wasn't scoring. Like we saw what happened to Kansas's offense when he wasn't there. It just went to shit despite the best efforts of Hunter Dickinson and Johnny Furphy and
my guy the Furf,
the Furf, exactly. So like you said, it's not like he's Ryan Dunn out there and just like not really scoring at all.
Oh God, no.
Here's the thing that confuses me the most about him. In addition to like what you said about, well, like how good is he on offense and like what level does he reliably score at in the NBA, right? Because he's not getting pick and roll ball handler reps as a rookie, and he's not like he can attack closeouts pretty well because he's really strong, but like you said, he's not blowing you like Dalton Connect off of like a closeout when there's three other offensive scoring threats better than him is going to be like kind of a monster closeout attacker. Right. And with Kevin, I don't know if that's the case, although he does have great feel, so like that might let him punch above his weight. But the thing that confused me the most about him is this. So I watched him towards the middle of the year and I was like, damn, I know his reputation is one as an elite defender, but like I don't really see that. I had the same conclusion you did. I was like, he's not like a menace out here. So I hit up a couple other people on Twitter and I was like, am I tripping? Like, what's going on here? And they were like, watch his stuff from the year before and at Texas Tech on defense. And I did. And in the 2 years preceding this year, I was like, oh, this guy's a menace. Like this guy laterally reminds me of Deuce McBride. And like I'm like, you have amazing agility and footwork. And it's not just your strength and your technique, but like you have actual physical gifts here. And the next question that kind of logically followed from me is like, all right, is his defense not on the same level as what it used to be because of the injuries? Is it because he has such offensive responsibilities now for Kansas, right? Is it because he got bigger, right? Like he's jacked now, and it's not like he wasn't jacked back then, but like he clearly put on some muscle. So I'm like, this makes it hard because if you promised me that there was like a 75% chance I could get 2024 McCullough on offense, janky shot and all, with 2022, 2023 defense, then I would sign up and I would put that a lot higher on my board than actual Kevin McCullough is. So, like, this is one of the elements of him being an older prospect that I don't know what to do with. Is like the sample is just kind of weird, and if I see a prospect who like has outlier shooting or something for 1 year, I can see and say like, oh, did his form get better, or was he getting more catch and shoots or something like that? But I have no idea what to do with this information regarding Kevin McCullough.
I'll say that in terms of historical draft trends, it's usually the burden. Like as the burden tilts on offense, and it's the same in the NBA. Like
right.
DeJounte Murray, as the burden tilts on offense, then the defense is going to slip up a little bit, and his offense is obviously going to shrink. And he's smart enough. Kevin knows where his bread is buttered. He will do whatever it takes to stay in a rotation and stay on the floor, and that's why, like, by saying I have him around 20, like I'm betting on a lot of that. There are real pathways to him for sticking around. And in defense of his jumper, not necessarily his mechanics, but his mindset, he is not a like a really tentative shooter. Like he knows because he's been through the draft process multiple times before and he's gotten the same feedback. Like he's a smart kid. He knows that it is worse to pass up a three when you are open than it is to take one and miss one. Because over the course of a game with all those possessions, you passing up a three doesn't mean you're getting to a better shot necessarily. It just means that you are giving the defense time to reset. And so janky shot and all, like he was letting it fly pretty consistently early in the season for Kansas. And so I think that the right fit for him may not be New York, because to me, for someone who is, I think, a good to very good athlete, but not a great one at the NBA level, he's going to have to play in a more 5-out scheme with a more vacated paint a lot so that he's not taking really contested stuff at the rim where he can really pick his spots and cut. And the Knicks don't really profile to be that sort of a team. But I think eventually I think Kevin will find his place. It's just a question of whether it's the same, is he really going to be worth reinvesting in at the end of that second deal? Or the end of the first deal heading into his second one. With it's enough of a question where, like I said, I will find other guys to like ahead of him to nudge him out of like the lotto discussion and everything. But I think, there's enough to recommend him. And I think the answers that we're looking for lie in stuff that we won't be privy to, medical reports and stuff like that. So that's sort of where I'm at with him.
Yeah, he's an interesting player from the perspective of the Knicks for those reasons. I definitely think some team is gonna not overcomplicate it and say like we can make his jump shot go from bad to fine and just go with that. Maybe one of the teams with multiple picks, of which there are many this year. So including the Knicks for now. So we'll see what happens with McCullough. He's just I don't know. I'm like irrationally annoyed that like people keep mocking to him. I'm like, this motherfucker, like Tibbs would not play him. Like he's not gonna pat. Like he's a willing shooter, like you said. He's not gonna pass up threes, but like I don't think he clears on either end enough for. Not that any rookie instantly has Tibbs trust, right? Like even like Quickly and Grimes and Deuce and Obi all had to go through the ringer and often White Plains even to get where they had to get for his trust. The next guy I want to talk about real quick is Tristan da Silva, who to me is like the most boring prospect. And every time I watch Colorado, I'm like, I could watch like 3 minutes of Tristan da Silva film, and my work on Tristan da Silva is complete. Like
Oh man,
it seems like that's what he seems like to me. And I know with any of these guys, once you dig below the surface, there's always more fun and interesting stuff. And as Colorado suffered injuries throughout the year, we began to see them get a little bit funky with both like Cody Williams sometimes bringing the ball up and doing some offense. And, from when I checked in on Tristan da Silva in the first half of the year, he's like a big dude on the Colorado team, right? For people who haven't seen him, he's like legit 6'9", 23 years old, like not skinny, not jacked, but not like definitely not skinny. And I was like, man, he like never puts the ball on the deck. And then in their last couple games of the season, he had more like drives in those games than he did in like the rest of the early season, middle of the season combined. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Clearly, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And he can do a little bit of dribbling. Nobody expects him to be hot sauce now. So anyway, for people who don't know, like let me just take a step back real quick. So Tristan da Silva, 6'9", good shooter, although we could debate how good of a shooter, but he definitely is not like, you're not talking like Kevin McCullough. Like he's a pretty, I would say he's definitely like a reliable NBA shooter for sure. Like he gets some shots even off the move. He takes some well beyond the college line, corners above the break. So he mixes it up, and to good effect for Colorado. What are they? The Buffaloes? I'm trying to think of their
the
mascot.
Buffs.
The Buffs. That's right. So my questions with him in terms of his skills is like, okay, he's 6'9". He seems to have great feel for defense. He knows how to handle somebody one-on-one. He knows how to execute help responsibilities and stuff like that. But like, I'm worried about the can he dribble, can he pass stuff, because to me, role players, to say nothing of more than role players, need to be able to put it on the deck and do stuff. The old 3-and-D with no dribbling capacity is a thing of the past unless you're truly elite at one of those things like OG Anunoby or something. And even he knows how to drive and kick these days, although it took him a couple of years. So where are you at on da Silva?
Yeah, so as of like a month ago, I was pretty high on him. I still like him as a first round pick, but I've lowered slightly. I went back and watched some more Colorado. As far as what you're talking about in terms of putting it on the deck and everything, I think that he will be fine at that, because he sort of morphed over the course of his career at Colorado from someone who really liked to set up in the post and kind of be a hub and pass out of the post into this guy who's really setting up more on the perimeter now and playing outside in. My consistent frustration with him and with Colorado as a whole is that I thought he was an overpasser, that he was not trying to leverage his ability to score enough. And I think playing more outside in helped that a little bit. But the big thing with Tristan that I can see is that his last step just isn't quite explosive enough for me, even at 6'9". And I think that probably contributes a little bit to his passing, because when he's driving, when he's around the hoop, he will sometimes make a business decision on offense and try to be like, well, instead of trying to go up and finish this over someone, even though I'm 6'9", let me try this wraparound interior pass to like Eddie Lampkin, and it'll end up being a turnover or something like that. Or instead of trying to go up strong and draw a foul, let me try to do a reverse under the hoop. And it just kind of it just like more avoidant as a finisher than he should be.
And those that I want to flag that, because to me, like, if it's a younger prospect, I'm like, oh, like they gotta, maybe that for some reason or another they have to learn to be physical. But when you're a 23-year-old playing against people predominantly younger, that's one of those things where I'm like McCullough, for example. Like McCullough may not have the most saucy handle, but he knows at the end of the day, hey, if I jump into somebody, I'm stronger than these teenagers, so it might not be pretty, but I'm gonna go for it. And De Silva, he's just it's almost like, what we see in some European prospects when we talk about like academy brain and stuff like that. Just like, dude, just you're 6'9", you're like 5 years younger, I mean older than these guys. Just go through them.
Yeah.
And I know your coach wants you guys to be like the fucking Spurs, but like maybe don't and just go through the teenager instead.
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons I'm higher on McCullough than Tristan. Is that exact thing. And I think on defense, Tristan, again, he has improved his mobility a lot because he was one of those guys who was kind of a little bit like thicker in the trunk, like a post player was. And he has reformed his body a little bit to be more mobile, and he's very sound on rotations and knows where to be. But at the end of the day, he's sort of a ground giver. He wants to stay in front, but he will like back up to stay in front on drives. And it's one of the, like, in the NBA that it's just not going to fly. Like,
Yeah.
Kevin is just tougher and is willing to absorb contact and wants to absorb contact from someone driving so that they have to pass it off. And like with Tristan, it's just not quite there. To go again back to like my list of guys, someone like Duncan Robinson, he hits like late compared to most NBA players who are worth reinvesting in. He hits at age 25 or whatever, because it takes time for his body to really be ready to hang in the NBA.
Right.
And I think Tristan still needs that time. Like, he'll get drafted, but you look at him and he's pretty skinny. It still looks like, he's just not a naturally explosive guy. Like, there's still a little bit of weight sort of in his ass that makes it so that he's not flying around the court. He's doing his best and he's like very clever, but it's just he's not like winning physical battles consistently enough. So maybe by the time he is 26 years old, he has put on the right kind of weight to where he can do that. Because again, his feel is high and he is a better shooter than Kevin is. But it's another one where it's like, well, I'm probably okay letting another team go through that journey with him. That's even in a draft like this, because a lot of people look at the numbers, his highlights look great because when he's cooking, he can pick you apart as a connecting passer. His movement threes look good. You see the size and you're like, man, size, feel, shooting touch, dribble, pass, shoot, like, let's go. But I do think it's going to, especially since he's 6'9" and he's not going to be guarding down much because he's not the freak athlete. He's going to be guarding guys who are wings, and NBA wings are like physical as shit and they'll go right at him. So it's going to be a process. I think there's a path for him to get a second contract and to hang around, but I think it's just going to be a bit of a longer process.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. There's just not enough physical domination for someone that old, and I think that is becoming one of the clear, like, helpful answers to me, is like, for the older prospects, like, are they just in a class of their own, especially the much older prospects, right? Like, all the guys you mentioned, like Deuce, Herb, Trey, like, these guys are monster athletes, whether highlight wise, functionally, or both. And
right,
Tristan and McCullough are just, they're not quite there. And it shows up in like steal and block rates. It shows up in free throw rate. It shows up in a couple of ways.
Yeah. Tristan's free throw rate has been sub 30 each of the last 2 years, and that's as like an upperclassman. And it should. I mean, it just needs to be a little bit better than that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. He's another one who I've seen mocked to the Knicks for all the same reasons as McCullough. Like, oh, it seems like a plug and play older wing that Tibbs can just get to or whatever and not be pissed at. The next guy I want to talk about has entered these conversations much more recently, thanks to UConn's prestige, and they're just fucking steamrolling everybody in large part due to his own contributions. And that's Tristan Newton.
That's right.
You talk about ending the season strong. I mean, it's tough to end the season as strong as he did. And he's the kind of player where, like, all right, we're looking at, all right, he's older, so he's going to be about a little under 23, I think. I think like a month before turning 23 or something around the draft. Double digit BPM, free throw rate close to 50, right?
Yeah,
Like
not a problem for him. He gets to the line.
he gets to the line. His efficiency numbers leave a little something to be desired. So there's definitely a question of like, is he a better shooter than his 3-point percentage? 10 threes per 100, only 32%. I'd probably err toward the side of yeah, because he took some ambitious fucking threes.
Dude, yeah.
He
Yes.
he's definitely not scared to hoist it as part of that offense. And if you split the difference between his like 3-point numbers and frequency and his free throws, then at worst he's probably like a solid shooter.
And over 80% every year in college from the line.
Right. With a large sample, right? Like 5 years
Yes.
of college hoops. So we know he can do that. And then the interesting stuff to me in his statistical profile is like you go to his assist percentage the last 2 years. 31 this year, 28 last year, 35, 34 his last year at Eastern Carolina. And those are like point guard numbers, but watching UConn, I mean, their offense was as complicated and democratic as any that you can find in any year of college basketball. So to me, I don't view him necessarily as a lead ball handler, point guard prospect, although he can do that a little bit because he got a little bit of sauce and he does know how to like run pick and rolls and stuff like that and handoffs. So the good thing is he's kind of a tweener guard, but he doesn't have tweener guard size. He's like legit 6'5", and I mean he's not the most jacked 6'5", but he's still 6'5". That's we're not talking about your classic quadruple A size Grant Riller type 6'2", 6'3". And those are the players who you often see in that archetype where it's like, well, they were lead guards in college, but I don't know if they can handle that kind of usage in the NBA because when you're small, you have to be incredible, right? Like like Jalen Brunson or some shit. So it's just a really high bar to clear. But where are you at on him? Because to me, I look at what he's done as a 23-year-old and
22-year-old. 22.
or 20 as a 22-year-old, right? And I'm looking at the end of my first rounders and I'm like, there's these other guys that have more size, like McCullough and De Silva. And sure, those guys can probably guard up better than he can nominally just because of strength and size. But if Newton does everything else better, then like, is that worth it, right? And this is another one of the Knicks things, which is like, they'd rather take the guy who's 2 or 3 inches shorter and just better at stuff and just figure that shit out, right? Like Deuce, Grimes, Anunoby, Quickly. None of these guys are above 6'6". I don't know. Well, OG is like 6'6" and change. But like even him and RJ are like, yeah, 6'6", 6'7". Like that's not even that tall for wings, right? Like, so they just err on the side of skill and production. So where are you at on Newton?
Dude, I'm tempted to put him in the top 20. Tempted.
Ooh.
I will right now I have him the end of the first round. That's where I
Okay.
got him. And it's not just his statistical profile, which is quite good. And I had a tweet about him when I was on a UConn high after the national title game. That was a Bartorovic filter that is like across the board production. I'll read it to you. And I apologize because I don't like reading stats a lot for podcast segments, but it was offensive rebound percentage of at least 4. Because he's gotten a couple triple doubles at UConn, and that's not a team where rebounds are just available because they have Donovan Clingan. But offensive rebound percentage of at least 4, assist percentage of at least 25, a block percentage of at least 0.5. He's been around 1 each year.
I didn't realize his offensive rebound percentage was above 5. That's like, UConn was so good, man. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, why? Why? That's not fair.
I mean, because his feel for the game is elite. I mean, that's the point, is that he tracks the ball so well. His assist to turnover ratio was 2.5 last year. It was 2 last year, but sorry, offensive rebound at least 4, assist percentage 25, block of at least 0.5 because he gets up off of 1 foot a little bit better than you think he would. And then the rest is just like shot making, free throw percentage of at least 80, 100 made free throws, 30 made threes. And in the last 10 years, there have only been 2 seasons that have done that, and they're both Tristan Newton the last 2 years. No other player in college basketball, high major, has crossed all those thresholds. And like, whatever. It's Bart Torvik, so you can fall into whatever rabbit hole you want to and come to whatever conclusion you want to. But it's also matched by the fact that he's been the most outstanding player in the Final Four each of the last 2 seasons. So the only thing really holding me back from being super aggressive on him is the fact that he doesn't finish that well at the hoop, even though he's so good at getting to the line. And that's what has dragged down his efficiency, is that he likes to operate in the lane and close to the hoop, but the touch isn't quite where you'd want it to be. But I would be stunned if he is not at minimum a backup NBA point guard, just because like backup point guard's got to come from somewhere. The guy who is closing national title games and getting triple doubles and hitting these really long threes. I mean, you talked about the audacity. Like if you catch Tristan in the right game, like when they played at Kansas, they played McCullough, and Kansas actually won that game, but UConn came back to take the lead with about like 8 minutes left. And it was him. Like he was the offensive guy off the dribble for that team. And UConn has this like beautiful system, all these cuts and screens and re-screens, and they put Klingon in the high post to find cutters. Cam Spencer is a headache to guard. Caravan, such a good connector. But like when it's someone on the ball and like they need someone to settle everyone down and go get a bucket, they didn't need to settle down much. But when they did, like it was Newton. And it bears out how he finds ways to impact every facet of the game. And I would be very surprised to see that just wash out, considering he has NBA size. So I'm sure he gets a little bit of a boost for playing for UConn, but you have to. He was helping to drive them, and they were so good, and they relied on him. So I don't want to. It would be unfair, especially in this space, to bring up Jalen Brunson as a comparison, because how dare I? Because Brunson shot like 70% at the rim. I mean, he was the national player of the year. He was a legit 3-level scorer for Villanova. But UConn, is probably just as dominant of a college team as those 2018 Wildcats were. And when the college team is that dominant, there's usually multiple pros. And I like Steph Castle fine, but it's not like Steph Castle was driving winning for them. He's a pro, but he wasn't the engine of the team. The engine of the team was Klingon on defense, and then it was more democratic on offense, but Newton had a big role. So I would be very hesitant to be like, oh yeah, draft him 45th, whatever. I just get me someone with his kind of feel into NBA space where his threes are a little bit easier. And I think you will really have something. I believe in him. I will probably end up with him in the 20s or something. And it's not like he's a wing where, the wings have all these different options of how to fit into different kinds of rosters.
Right.
But like, I just believe he's going to stick somewhere. And I'm excited to see how he does it, because I think he's going to find a way to help wherever he goes.
I think I'm with you. He has some interesting indicators, like his floater numbers are really good. He just has like some weird stats because his shot selection is so crazy. Like his floater numbers are really good. His pull-up 2-point shooting numbers kind of suck. His pull-up 3-point shootings are meh, but his catch and shoot 3-point numbers are pretty good. So he's definitely got a lot of creation, like flashes. I just wonder about upside as a shooting guard. It's pretty, because I don't envision him personally as like a starting point guard in the NBA, just because that's an insane bar to clear. Like even 15th to 30th ranked starting point guard in the NBA are pretty insane players.
Right.
And
Of course. Yes.
yeah, so I'm thinking about like, okay, the path to upside for ball handling guards, aside from that, is things like what we've seen with the Knicks with Deuce, IQ, Grimes, and Dante, all to varying levels, right? Where like some of them are on ball more, like IQ, where he's by the end of his Knicks tenure, he's full-fledged point guard, and we're seeing that bear out in Toronto.
Mhm.
Other times it's Deuce, where you're saying he's now experimenting with scoring in the lane a little bit more, but he's really still more of a caretaker guy, and he's not really like someone who's just gonna like high pick and roll and just get to chefing and start your offense like that. So with Newton, I don't think he's quite as off ball as say Quentin Grimes.
Mhm.
I don't think he's quite as on ball as Quickly, who was a pure point guard in high school and stuff like that. But he's probably somewhere in the middle. So do you think there's a chance he can get to, in an NBA where there's so many vets and young talented players competing for playing time? Do you think there's a world where he can like start at a 2? I'm not even saying on like a conference finalist, just like respectably start as a 2, right? Like
As a 2, probably not. I mean, I don't know, but like you look at, Tyus and Trey Jones. I mean, they're going to be in the league a long time in some
yeah.
capacity. Sometimes they start for bad teams. Other times they're in rotations for good
Mm-hmm.
ones. I sort of think of it that way. I like in rotations now, they stagger ball handling stars. So
Right.
like backup point guard is not what it used to be. It's not like there's just 20 minutes a night available for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But something I would like to see done is that whoever drafts Klingon, just take Tristan in the second round. Just like bank on those two, because at minimum, Tristan's going to help Klingon assimilate because he's a few years older, and I'm sure they're buddies, given how well
Mm-hmm.
that they play
Mm-hmm.
together, how good their chemistry is, and like he's going to be there probably in the second round. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
you just look at the world of second round picks, and when you said starting point guards in the NBA are also, they're so good and athletic, like I agree. It's just I just go back to like there's no one really matching his profile. Like, why is it that a
Mm-hmm.
guy who is okay physically but not great, why is he getting to the line so much? Like, why? And it's not like you can put that all on Connecticut's offense, because his free throw rate at East Carolina when he was there was like just sub 50 as well.
There's some quickly there in that respect. There's like getting to the line, like having the handle to
Yeah.
get into the paint, and also the state of mind to just embrace taking a hit here and there, and sometimes grifting a little bit, right? Like those are
Right.
all skills. And
And he's
with
got tricks in the book, like shoulder
yeah.
fakes and funky release angles. Like he had that play against Edie in the national title
Oh my
game where
gosh.
he went at him and
With
just like
no
let it
glass.
go early, like behind his shoulder, and it went in. Like I just yeah, I tend to think that some of the weirdness of his shot selection will be cleaned up when he's playing in an NBA system, but I don't know. I will confess to being like I don't have an extremely clear vision of what the value is that he provides. It's just like a bet that is very worthy to make. If we're going to bet on production and guys who are good and guys who affect winning and guys who know how to play with talent, like it's clear he clearly does. There's no
He's basically playing in an NBA offense, to your point. So like
yeah,
it's not, him learning how to do NBA shit on either end of the, like UConn is doing NBA shit on both ends of the court, and their players are doing NBA shit on both ends of the court. And to your point, like I've had a lot of people, Knicks fans, hit me up and they're just like, can we just draft Newton? Like if it's in the second round, the end of the first round, like whatever, like just he's got the dog in him. Like let's just bet on the personality.
yeah.
And I'm like, that's not even a bad approach to justifying Tristan Newton as your draft pick once you get into the, the late first. Like, and like you said, like of course it's nice to dream about upside with the late first and certainly with the second round pick, but like you look at somebody like Deuce, right? Like, can Deuce play 25 minutes a game as a starting shooting guard in the NBA? Probably at this point. Will he? I don't know, because it's just rare to see like some of that short play shooting guard. But
Mm-hmm.
like he's started 20 games in 3 guard lineups for the Knicks and basically averaged 19 points a game with great defense, right? So like again, not comparing Newton to Deuce because they're different kinds of players, but like sometimes those type of two-way skilled guards can have false ceilings, and that's when it might become you may wish you hadn't, as a draft analyst, like quibbled so much about like
Right.
starter versus bench and instead just worried about like, okay, is this motherfucker good? Can he be good as a sixth or seventh man?
Right.
Like if he's not better than Dante DiVincenzo, who fucking now has the Knicks 3-point record, like is that so much of a crime? Like, no, Dante's really fucking good. Like Desmond Bain, really fucking good.
And
Bogdanovich, really
shouts
fucking
to your
good.
Knicks, officially the 2 seed. It happened, Prez.
I
One
know, I
one by
know.
one in OT.
Wasn't pretty, but this is what happens. I look forward to. I had the box score up, but I wasn't watching because I knew that would distract me, and I'm obviously a professional around these parts. So
Well, I was checking it. I'm sorry. I'm unprofessional. My bad. My
it's
bad.
okay. It's okay. No, the real reason I didn't have it up was because I don't have cable, nor do I have ESPN, and I didn't feel like getting onto like the 4th page of Google results and dealing with all that for the computer I'm using right now. So I'll check it out later. But yeah, so Newton, I don't know. There's something like that just inspires more confidence, even though he's smaller and there's a lot of Knicks take a
He's bigger
wing.
than McBride. I mean, he's a
Oh
worse
yeah,
athlete, but he is 6'5". Like I don't.
right.
Yeah.
He's not little.
No.
He's just not a wing. That's
And
all.
it's just hard to like again, it's hard to analyze this stuff in NIL eras because it's still so young, like the era is. But
Hmm.
to go from East Carolina to UConn and immediately win 2 national titles as a point guard, like I really just don't care that the system obviously matters, but like he's good. I don't know. I don't know. Like I think that at the end of the day, he will probably get drafted, which is nice. I just hope he gets a guaranteed deal out of the gate because it would be a good confirmation that teams value production number one, but like production that is in the right places. Because we haven't talked much about his shooting. I think he will be a decent NBA shooter. But
Yeah, he's
you know,
this year he's at 39% on unguarded catch and shoots. Number drops 34 for guarded. 36% on off the dribble threes. But like we've said, like he's taken, I don't think he's going to be in conversations for the best shooter in this class, but
no. I don't think
he's
so.
given the audacity and just like you said that his 3-point die is going to ease up a little bit in the NBA. I think he'll be solid. Plus the thing that just looks good. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would be fine with the Knicks just coming away with him and just betting on another undersized dog. Seems to have worked out for them so far. Uh, the next guy I want to talk about is actually not that old. I'm breaking the rule a little bit. It's Deron Holmes, the center. I haven't talked about him on Draft Strickland this year, and to me, he's confounding for a very specific reason. So the reason I'm talking about Deron Holmes on a podcast about old prospects is, to me, most good centers get drafted early. Like they don't
Mm-hmm.
stay 3 years in college or 4 years in college. Like if you do BART searches for juniors and centers who got drafted, like it's pretty slim pickings out there. And Deron Holmes is super fascinating to me because like I'm not even going to get into his statistical profile. It is absolutely exceptional. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is like a put it on the like Bart Hall of Fame type shit. Everything through the roof, like accuracy, efficiency, rebounding, block shots, all that shit. Um, so my questions about Deron Holmes are twofold, and these are the things that worry me, but I'm not sure if I'm just being a hater. So number one, I'm like, he's old for a center, so that's why his statistical profile or that's one of the reasons why his statistical profile is so crazy, is because bigs are inherently already going to physically dominate other teenagers who are not bigs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are an older big, then you're going to have an especially large physical advantage compared to, say, an older point guard or Tristan Newton or something like that. And then the second thing that I kind of wonder about, and I don't mean to diminish his awesome stats, free throw rate like way over 70, gets to the rim, has like a bazillion dunks this year.
Every
Like
year he has a bazillion dunks.
every year he has a bazillion dunks. Like
Mm-hmm.
like that guy just he's gonna fucking find a way to dunk it. And it's not just like easy dump offs and shit like that. Like he's taking dunks off the dribble and stuff. And this is my thing with Dayton, is like they run offense through him a lot. Like they let
Yes.
him
Mm-hmm.
bring the ball up. They do shit where he's the handoff guy and he's doing like play action dives to the rim. He's running inverted pick and rolls and all that shit. And to me, like every time I watch Dayton, I'm like, yo, he's an upperclassman big who's got enough handle to like run inverted pick and rolls, and he's stronger than almost everybody he's gonna go against. Like, of course he's gonna decimate these kids. And to me, I'm like, that's all great, but like, what coach is giving him inverted pick and rolls in the NBA, or what coach is letting him bring the ball up the floor for any time in year 1, 2, or 3? And like, my biggest misses in my draft history are when I rule out roles for players and then they're like, hey, Prez, guess what? I'm going to do that shit anyway. And they're awesome at it. So this would not be the first time I make this particular brand of mistake. But to me, I'm like, yeah, if he's not doing all this cool shit that he gets to do for Dayton, like, all right, like I'm like, he's not like a particularly inspiring stretch 5 or defensive 5. He's improved vastly and has hit a great number of threes with accuracy for a big. So it's not like he's like a bum out here from 3, but I'm just like, I don't think any team is going to be worried about like Deron Holmes from 3 for the next like 2 years at least, right? So I don't know. Am I being a hater? Am I disregarding his production at his age?
A little, but you're not being a hater for hater's sake. I mean, you're grounding your hate in like logical thought. So you're an ethical hater. So that's nice.
That's the sweet spot. Thank you, Chuck.
And I was also a little bit of an ethical hater of Duran most of this cycle. But it's because, number one, I don't really think he's a 5. I'll start there.
Ooh, okay.
I think that this sort of, because I don't know what his official height measurement is. Is it like 6'11", 6'10", 6'11",
6'10" or 6'11", yeah, with really long arms.
Yeah, I want to see what he measures out at wingspan wise at the combine, because I would be shocked if it were like shorter than like 7'2".
Oh yeah,
I think it's probably at least that. But when you look at him, like, he's very skinny, and he's 21 turning 22. I won't say very skinny, but he's like slender. And
he'd be absolutely slender for an NBA 5. Like,
right.
Like he'd get pushed around.
But because he can face up, and to say nothing of being able to run inverted pick and rolls, like before he was doing that, a lot of his dunks, a lot of what he would do is just like, okay, college 5, let me set up on the baseline, face you up, and like, good luck to you. You're not stopping me. And so I think that he is somewhere between 4 and 5. And in the NBA, to your point about his fit and his role, you want your 4s and 5s to be like pretty clean. You want to know what you're getting out of that spot, because so many players in the NBA are sort of power forwards on defense. Like, so many great players are these big wings who then sort of default to being a power forward on defense, who just sort of guards someone in the corner, the worst player on the other team.
Julius Randle says hello.
But that means that if you're an opposing power forward like Duran would be, you might like weirdly be tasked with guarding really good players. And you don't want to, like, this is one of the concerns I have about Tristan da Silva, going back to him, is that defensively he's going to be guarding NBA wings, and that's going to be a problem for him because he gives ground. Duran, I don't love his defensive feel necessarily, because he's being used as a center, and it's just he's like a lot of his defensive responsibility is just tracking drives in the A10, which is not like the most difficult thing in the world to do, but it's his recovery tools are crazy because he's so athletic. So it might be a situation where, like, take Obi, another Dayton alum, where like there were all these defensive questions on him, and enough defensive questions to where even though he flashed in New York and he was like a positive player by the time he left New York, they got some value for him, but he's on his second team. I think that Duran is similar. He might even be more purely physically gifted than Obi was, although that's close. I mean, Obi's really gifted. And it will be maybe a challenge for his first team to really figure him out. But I like his jumper. Like it just sort of looks good to me when teams.
I like it from 3 as well, actually.
Yeah, I just
and
like
it's weird because I think his free throws are super ugly.
Yeah, I don't know. Like right now, I agree with you that like he does a lot of cool shit. It's weird, but to me, like cool weird shit in this draft is like basically lottery.
It's lotto from the sense of like, this is kind of where I've landed, is like I could place him wherever I'll place him in my rankings or my board, but like it's just the outcome has high variance more so than other players. And I think about, a team in my neck of the woods like the Wiz that has a little bit more flexibility because they don't have as many dedicated players taking up roster spots. Like they could fucking let him do some of that funky stuff that to me is like Mickey Mouse shit, but like he could actually put, like, there is something to be said for letting bigs who have that skill utilize it more. Like we've seen it like with Nick Claxton, and like the Nets sometimes let him do it a little too much, and then they'll say no, for the next game you can't do any of that shit. But like there's sometimes I'm like Isaiah Hartenstein, like just fucking go dribble and do like your weird spin move to floater. Like it doesn't need to be, but the Knicks are so regimented that like they would never allow that. But another team with a little more flexibility absolutely could. It's not saying you have to do that for your whole offense, but like that to me, if a team was just like, we're gonna dabble in that, and then like aside from that, you're just gonna learn how to be a better rim protector and focus on crushing the glass and getting putbacks and killing mismatches. Like, and there's a universe where that actually ends up like, we're like, wow, like how did 25 people pass on this guy?
Right. That's where I'm at with him. And I think if I am right and about him not being a 5, but he can play with a 5. So he's now like setting up nominally in the corner or whatever.
Like Precious, but not crazy.
Like Precious, right. Because I really like talking about this archetype because I've underrated it in the past. So like you've got Precious, right, who's so defensively tilted. He stays on the floor because of his defense, but he's offensively audacious, and that has probably helped him stick around. Like if he was offensively passive, I don't know that he gets the opportunity in New York that he's gotten. And Duran's not going to be passive. If there's ever a situation where he attacks a closeout, even if it's a soft closeout or like they've blown the scouting report on him and they're not just letting him shoot, like whatever the case, if he gets into space, I want to see NBA wings challenge, like try to stop him at the rim and see what happens.
And we saw that with Precious when he was at his best with the Knicks, right? Like he started off horribly with the Knicks. He's currently horrible, but he had a special stretch in the middle where it was the doldrums of the regular season and teams instinctively close out to the corner. And Precious is like, he's getting from the corner to the rim much better than like Quentin Grimes ever did, for example, like because he's huge and athletic and like nominally coordinated as a ball handler for a large human being. So I don't know if I buy the defensive stuff, but like I do think he'll be able to hit corner threes and attack those closeouts and get a lot of dunks out of it for sure.
And to be clear, I'm not saying I buy the defensive stuff either. Precious is the defensively tilted version of this. But if you look at the other end of the spectrum, someone who I think today or yesterday just got another guaranteed deal, despite a lot of craziness. Look at Kai Jones. Okay. Kai, when he was at Texas, absolute physical freak, but had not developed his feel on either side of the ball at all, and was like purely a play finisher. And even he is getting a guaranteed deal to take him into his year, whatever, 23, 24,
And
25
his
year old
shot
season.
went from passable looking at Texas to worse in the NBA.
Right.
And Duran is, we can have qualms about his shooting sample size, but like he's definitely further ahead than Kai as a
And
shooter.
and he's gotten better by
Mm-hmm.
having an offense run through him as a passer. I mean, his assist rate was like 19 this year, and he's not like a super manipulative passer, but he knows now how to pass out of doubles, and he knows how to look for cutters, and like it's fine. I just think that if you're viewing the spectrum of that kind of player, I just want to bet on how athletic he is, that he kind of knows what he's doing a little bit, and that he has enough recovery tools to where if he's playing on the wing in the NBA as opposed to as a like a backup five, and he gets beat, he'll be able to slide and recover enough to where he can stay on the court and do this cool shit on offense if he's on a team that is willing to really sort of explore with him. Like that to me is weird as it sounds. Like that's upside. That's where I could see someone really arriving towards the end of their rookie deal because he's just so athletic and he's got enough feel and he's got this incredible finishing ability and some shooting touch where you're like, damn, like is Duran making 20 million a year now, for his second contract because he's shown himself to be sort of a positive player, even if it's not a full-fledged starter. And like, that's why I have him in that sort of late lottery, maybe call it like 12 to 17, like kind of tier. Cause it's enough worth betting on to me. Like he is not, again, going back to why prospects don't get into the NBA until they're older. With him, it's not athleticism related at all. It's just because people have trouble placing these sort of tweener 4-5s.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, but he has gotten better. And if you believe in the shot, which we both sort of do, then I'm willing to go on the journey with him. I am less comfortable passing him up than I would be McCullough 6'5", 6'6", De Silva not physically dominant enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't have these questions with him. And so that's why I'm a bit more bullish on Duran.
I think I'm more bullish on him than the other guys we've talked about. I'm just super Tibbs pilled for bigs where it's like, what? You can't anchor the rims and get the fuck out of my face. Like I don't like Jonathan Mogbo, Deron Holmes.
See, I love Mogbo
Johnny
too.
Broom. I like all of them, but I'm just like, like if you're not gonna anchor my defense as a 5, like I don't care. Like you could be an awesome backup, but like if you can get one of these guys to play the 4, then we're cooking with grease, and maybe you open up a lot more routes to value than I initially would have imagined.
And I think they're all 4s, and I like Mogbo and Duran more than Janai, because even though Janai is like super productive as a 5 in college, and I like him fine as a prospect, like he is not, I don't think he projects to be a physically exceptional NBA player. He is going to be an NBA player. Like he has the physicality and the athleticism to do it. But Mogbo and Holmes, I think, can stick out even in the NBA for how springy they are and just sort of the ground that they can cover on the perimeter and that
if they can hit corner threes on offense, they both have enough skills in terms of putting it on the deck and finishing and stuff like that. It's just can they hit the corner threes, which is a low bar to clear for any of these guys in my opinion, even the older ones. It's the easiest 3, right? And then it's can you hold up against can you perform the defensive responsibilities of a 4? And this could be a bit of an emerging archetype, guys who like are kind of in the middle and then find success as you have more skilled bigs in college, right? So like that could be another reason I have kind of foreclosed this in my head, is like we just haven't seen that too much, but that is definitely what you're like. It's kind of inevitable that undersized 5s who have skill may be able to masquerade as 4s, right? Like I was out here fucking making viral tweets about like, is Precious actually fucking amazing as a 4? Like, oh my God. So like it ended up being no, he was not amazing, but like, hey, somebody's gonna nail that archetype, and
Yeah.
then it could be any of those dudes, and it could be Duran for sure. All right, the last thing I got for you, because predictably, even though I said 1 hour, we're at like 90 minutes now.
There we go. We love it.
Are there? Just give me 3 quick hitters who you like for the Knicks in the late first,
Ooh.
and give me like the 1 or 2 minute sales pitch for each of them. No particular order, just guys we haven't talked about.
For the Knicks specifically, right?
Yeah.
So what picks do y'all project to have again?
Right now, I think it's like, well, geez, if we're the fucking 2 seed, let me see. 24 and 25 right now.
Okay. Well, look, I love Jalen Tyson. I think when you come on my podcast, we're going to talk about Jalen and some other on-ball guys, but I have him in the lottery, and he is the archetype that should fit with every team in terms of the dribble, pass, shoot, wing. So certainly him. I think there probably isn't in this draft, because they don't grow on trees. But if there is a Jalen Williams-ish bet in the class, to me, like, it's clearly Jalen in terms of real live dribble passing skill, real, in my opinion, 3-level scoring skill. I think his context in Cal was really bad, and I think that's why his finishing numbers weren't as good. But that's a dude who I think has NBA athleticism and legit 6'6", 6'7". I think that is a set and forget NBA player. And if he's there at 24, I just snatch him up immediately, and he will find his way in Tibbs land sooner or later, because I think he'd find his way anywhere.
I like it.
So that's one. Let me see on my board here. Who am I like super? So like Holmes and Mogbo, if we're like Precious is there, they're not necessarily going to get their shot.
Precious is not going to be there. I don't think
you've got Deuce in sort of the Devin Carter spot. Devin probably goes before pick 24, 25. So we can
much to the sadness of Knicks draft fans everywhere. Right. Devin Carter, I may break my formula scale for most Knicksy prospect when I run the numbers later.
And most Chucky Darty prospect. I've loved Devin Carter for a long time. I was a fan of his last season, so very happy to see his rise. All right, here's a couple other guys. This one might come off maybe not the Tibbs profile, but I think it will be worth it around pick 24 or 25 is Justin Edwards from Kentucky.
Ooh,
and
we know Worldwide West on the Knicks loves the Kentucky player.
And to me, like, the Kentucky context deserves more time than I'm going to give it right now, because it's so weird. But historically, it's like, oh, they really suppress guards. They don't know what to do with their guards. Name Tyrese Maxey quickly, Booker, whomever, SGA even to a certain extent, because they were more oriented around Kevin Knox for the first half of that season for that team. But at the end, like, I don't think that means that other players don't necessarily get suppressed as well. I mean, Karl Towns took 1-3 when he was there or whatever. And Dillingham and Shepherd are these clearly really good guards who both came off the bench on that team. And I just don't know that Edwards, who started, got the best sort of environment playing off of DJ Wagner for so long. I think that when you look at his actual efficiency numbers, they're underrated. His true shooting percentage was about 60. He shot at least decently from everywhere on the floor. It's just that his usage was low. They ran nothing for him or through him, really. And so you're left with this guy with a really good high school pedigree, NBA wing size, has some defensive versatility, took some defensive assignments, including guarding Dalton Connect. I thought he did a pretty decent job on him when they played Tennessee. And, it's a boring sort of, yeah, he's a wing, but he's a wing. He's a wing whose shot is not broken, who I think in an actual sensible offense could find his way. So to me, he's an underrated guy. I know that like the box score numbers were not outstanding, but that's to me, if I'm identifying sort of hidden gems who didn't necessarily have the counting stats, I think you could do worse than being like, well, what was going on with Kentucky? Because usually there's always someone there who is a little hidden. And so I would look hard at Justin, number one. Do you have any thoughts on him before I try to pick someone else for New York? Prez, you there? Can you hear me? Am I gone?
Oh, my bad. I had my mic muted. I was talking and didn't realize it.
Okay, good.
Nah, I was saying like he had a terrible start to the year, and towards the end of the year, I was like, man, every game he's like shooting it well from three. Like, what's going on here? And then just looking at his box plus minuses, it's on Bart. Like from November 6th through the end of January, it's just a sea of negative plus minuses for any given game, with a couple of like low positive ones, like +1, +4, +4, +2, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then after February, something happens, beginning with the game versus Vanderbilt, and it's mostly positive until like versus Texas A&M at in the very end of this team's run. They got walloped, and he was like a -15 in that game. But it's like the impact. I didn't watch Kentucky enough to really understand it, but like over that last third of the month, his impact was very clearly positive on the court. And maybe it's as simple as he was shooting a lot better, and therefore his team did better. He is definitely a weird prospect who, like, is a very good athlete, but like didn't really get many blocks, for example, and doesn't really pass. But his role was also weird, like you said. So like,
Yeah, it's like they always play big 7-footers to anchor the paint, right? And they always invest offensively in like a high volume pick and roll guard. The team's never really that well spaced. It's like, well, what do you do for sort of a supporting wing there? And to me, I think his shot looks good.
Same.
Mostly, I think he keeps it in his sort of load position a little, like he gets there a little early and sort of holds it there. And I think it could probably, that motion could be made a bit more fluid.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, man. When I've seen him go in the like one-on-one in the mid-range, when he did get sort of an ISO rep and he could get to his shot off the dribble a little more, to me
41% on off the dribble 2-pointers.
There you go.
Is like, to me, for off the dribble 2s, 40% is my threshold for like, oh, this shot is feasible for you at least a little bit.
It looked more fluid to me. I didn't know the numbers, but I'm glad they confirmed the limb I'm out on here in supporting him. So like,
he also has some hilarious shooting numbers that I will just share. So on catch and shoot, I actually didn't know he was in this category. This is one of my favorite categories of players to find. So 38% on catch and shoot threes. On guarded catch and shoot threes, 49%, and on unguarded, 27%, with 41 of each. So to me, there's one or two guys every year. I tweeted it. I forget, there was one or two other guys this year who also have weird reverse splits. And usually it's just noise. Mathurin is the guy who I always remember as having like his overall 3-point percentage dragged down by just bricking open threes. And if he even hits like 34% of those unguarded threes, 35%, you're probably pushing his overall 3-point volume over 40%, which is obviously a good number. So there's definitely something there. And I feel like once you get into the second round, if nobody has taken Justin Edwards, that's definitely the point where it's like, yo, just, even if we're gonna throw him on the Westchester Knicks, like, fuck it, who cares? Like, just do it. Like,
yeah,
you could do worse.
I think that makes sense.
Flyer.
And like, I think in time he'll be able to defend. I think he'll fit the Tibbs role there. I don't know. It's the 25th pick in a draft that people don't really like. Wouldn't you rather, like, don't you want to take a shot on a wing who can physically play in the NBA and has some offensive juice? Like, to me, it makes sense. And as another guy, this is more, I guess, maybe traditionally Tibbs like, especially this iteration of the Knicks where it's, national championship pedigree and such an intelligent connector. I'd go back to UConn and look at Alex Caravan. And he may not be a first round pick. That's fine. But you want to look at like a profile that is exemplary, exceptional. Look at Alex Caravan's profile. He's another guy. He's a sophomore, but an older sophomore. I think he's 21 now, I believe. But that guy is on fire everywhere from the floor. I think he shot over 70% at the rim. And I know it's like, it's UConn's system. Those are all assisted. And it's like, well, show me a wing who just shoots 70% at the rim anywhere, and it's going to get my attention. To say nothing of the fact that he's like a 40% free throw shooter on high volume anyway. And I think that he suffers a little bit from the sort of stereotype that he's a bad defender, but I don't think he's a bad defender. I think he's got long arms. I think he's, strong through his chest. And it is so rare that I see him make a bad decision on offense or defense. Shoot, pass, drive, where to be on D, when to contest, how to contest. Like, I just think he is among the highest field players in the draft. And since, the Knicks are basically in connector land now, where they just want to assemble as many good connectors as you possibly can, I think Caravan, come on in. And if he washes out because he doesn't have enough sauce off the dribble, then so be it. I don't really care. Like, I doubt that the Knicks are looking for saucy guys now. They're looking for smart players who can hang on the wing and finish the stuff that their offense creates for them. And I think that that's him. I'm a big fan of Caravan. I have him as a first round grade too. So, yeah.
I've gone back and forth with him. He's definitely, though, going to be higher on my Knicks board than my regular board for the reasons you said, just because I think there's enough there defensively to work with. And that I still got to dig into his defense a little bit more, but the fact that like he's locking in on defense, I'll just trust any of these UConn guys to be at an NBA baseline in terms of not only knowing what to do, but knowing technique, like just how, like literally like how to actually play defense. Like, okay, a screen is coming. What do you do with your feet? What do you do with your one arm versus the other arm to ensure that you can get around the screen? Like, all the UConn players are really good at all that shit, and they all kind of rebound, and they all can, Caravan is the best shooter of the group. Well, maybe him and Spencer. So like, yeah, even though like he doesn't, his role was very specific. I almost wonder that like that NBA offense kind of takes away from, like, yeah, he has a low free throw rate, very low, but like you almost have to consider UConn like an NBA offense where it's like, just because you're a really good player doesn't mean you're gonna get to like take it to the rack on UConn like you would on another team, because this is an NBA offense, and like Klingon, Newton, Spencer make the world go round, and everybody else is fitting in around those guys. That's not usually how it goes for players of the caliber of Alex Caravan or Steph Castle, right? So it could be a way to envision some sneaky role player upside. And I'm curious about how he measures out too, because like you said, like he doesn't feel short and he feels like he has long arms. So it'd be
he had a nearly 3% block rate. This is, again, as a wing. You're right about the free throw rate, but he shot nearly 74% at the rim, and he made nearly 100 layups. He made 95.
It's not small sample like your guy who shoots only threes and then, of course he shoots 70%. He took 12 layups this year or something like that.
Right. Like Reed Shepherd, again, Reed's good, but he made 39 layups all year. And it was 65%. So his defenders will be like, well, that'll translate. Well, okay. He made 39 layups and Caravan made 95. Yeah. I don't know, man. again, if I'm gonna miss on someone, have it be the ultra efficient like connector for a back-to-back national title team. He's been in college 2 years. He's won 2 national championships, and he's 6'8". So I don't know. I will go down with that ship happily. So
he would be Nixie in some ways and not Nixie in other ways. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Those are definitely 3 good darts. I like them all, and they'll all be higher on my Knicks board. This has unsurprisingly turned into a marathon pod. Chuck, thank you for rolling with us and giving the listeners so much of your time. Folks, you heard it all at the beginning of the pod, but please go follow this man. Go listen to the Chuck and Darts pod. At some point this cycle, I'll go over to his show, and then we'll do this again, talk about a different topic. You'll have to stay tuned for that. But yeah, Chuck, is there anything else you want to leave us delusional Knicks fans with as we enter the playoff chase? I guess to play Joel Embiid, maybe.
yeah,
I don't
man,
know.
just look forward to hanging that banner, baby. That's it.
All right, you heard it from once and current Knicks fan. We welcome you back, Chuck of the Chucking Darts pod. Thank you. And listeners, thank you for rocking with us. We will catch you guys whenever the next episode is, in a week, 2 weeks, who knows.